First ingredient, first thing you got in there, 1.5 cups of almond flour, and packed almond flour. Pack it right into the 1.5 cup measurements. The next thing you're gonna add there, and I should say this is the first layer, the bottom layer that we're making here. It's kind of like the cookie layer. So we've got your almond flour. Next thing you're gonna do, this is melted coconut oil, 3 tablespoons of melted and then kind of cooled coconut oil. So we'll make sure we get all that in there as best we can. Next thing you're gonna put in is 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Then we're gonna do a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And finally, the last thing for this layer is maple syrup. I like to use natural fresh maple syrup from the farm. This is 1, 2, and in total we're gonna do 3 tablespoons of this one. After you get everything in there, they suggest you use a fork. You could probably use a spatula too, but they say use a fork, and I find it works pretty well. You just mix the ingredients together like. So watch, I'm gonna dump this into the pan on top of the parchment paper. Put this over here for you. Oh, tiny bit went on the side there. There we go. And then you can just use your fingers to press it down and make sure you press it all the way out into the corners and the edges. See what I'm doing now, I'll turn it around and make sure I get it really nicely onto this side. Try your best to get it as even as you can, as even a layer as you possibly can, so it's not super thick on one side or the other, or in the middle, or around the edges or anything. So I think I've done a pretty good job. Look, there's a piece that got on the outside. So that's probably about good. Next thing you're gonna do while that's in the oven, you can get together the second layer. So this layer is gonna have to be warmed up in a pan on the stove, and then you're gonna pour it onto the first layer once the first layer is cooled a bit. So your second layer, you're gonna start with 2/3 of a cup of peanut butter. They suggest using natural peanut butter. That's typically what I do, but it wouldn't be the end of the world if you just used any kind of store-bought peanut butter, even the one that has sugar in it and whatnot. So there's the peanut butter. Next thing you're gonna do is 1/4 cup of coconut oil. Third thing is 1/3 of a cup of maple syrup. And this is one of the reasons why you don't necessarily need the peanut butter with sugar in it, because you got lots of other sweet stuff in here, like all this maple syrup. There's the maple syrup. Then you're gonna do 1 teaspoon of the vanilla again. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And that's it. I'm gonna warm this up on the pan and then show you pouring it onto the first layer in a minute here. So now I've got the second layer in the pot here. So I've had it on the stove and melted all those ingredients together, made it nice and liquidy. Now I'm just gonna pour this onto the bottom layer. It's had some time to cool down, and I'll pour it right on there. It's runny enough that it just runs out by itself nicely to the edges. You don't really even have to do anything to it to spread it around. There you go. Once you get that in there, I'm gonna put this in the fridge for somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes, just for the peanut butter to get nice and hard and everything else to harden up before I pour on the top layer, which is the chocolate layer. Now, last thing, you add the top layer, the third layer. This is just 3/4 cups of chocolate chips and 1 tablespoon of coconut oil melted in a pan. And then I'm gonna pour this on top to be the final layer. And for this one, once you get it all in here, just take a second because I don't want to lose any of this chocolate. There we go. Once you get this in there, you can kind of pick it up and tilt it around a bit so that the chocolate goes to cover all corners and sides of the pan. After I've done that, I'm going to throw this back in the fridge and let it sit for about an hour in the fridge. Then I'll pull it out and cut it up for you. And here it is, right out of the fridge. I'm gonna cut it right down the middle for you so you can see inside. I usually cut it 4 times this way, and then right down the middle, and you get a bit of a bar. So just take a look at that inside. And this is a delicious treat.